The shift in the court's climate was not sudden, but gradual, like a fever taking hold. As Queen Catherine fought her losing battle for legitimacy, a fresh, magnetic presence began to dominate the king's attention: Anne Boleyn. She arrived at court as a sophisticated lady-in-waiting, educated in the vibrant courts of France, possessing a sharp wit, an independent mind, and an undeniable allure that captivated King Henry VIII entirely. She lacked Catherine's formal, Spanish beauty, yet her dark, piercing eyes and fashionable elegance made her a formidable figure. Unlike many women who yielded easily to the king's desires, Anne proved to be strategically elusive. She understood the precarious fate of a king's mistress. She wanted the crown, or nothing at all. This calculated refusal set the kingdom on its head. Henry, already consumed by his belief that his first marriage was cursed by God, found in Anne a compelling reason to pursue his divorce, a new path to the desired male heir. The king's passion became inextricably tangled with his political need, forging an obsession that would change England forever. His desperation was poured into countless, passionate letters to Anne, revealing a man utterly bewitched. Anne became the single most powerful figure in England simply by saying no to the king's demands for a sexual relationship. The royal court soon split into two silent factions. On one side, the staunch Catholic loyalists, who stood by the rightful Queen Catherine and her daughter, Princess Mary. On the other, the ambitious reformers and young nobles, who flocked to Anne's side, seeing her as the gateway to the king's favor and the coming religious shift. To dine with Anne meant ambition. To send messages to Catherine was an act of dangerous defiance. This growing tension reached a visible climax during the formal court events. While Catherine still presided with quiet dignity as the queen, Anne would stand just a step away, bedecked in the jewels and gowns Henry had lavishly bestowed upon her, a constant, glittering insult to the wife he was trying desperately to discard. Cardinal Wolsey, the king's chief minister, quickly became Anne's bitter enemy. He tried everything to remove her, knowing her rising influence threatened his own power and his loyalty to the Roman Church. But Anne proved to be his intellectual superior, relentlessly undermining his position in the king's mind. She was the one who finally convinced Henry that Wolsey was obstructing the great matter and delaying his divine right to marry her. In the end, it was Anne Boleyn who orchestrated the downfall of the cardinal, clearing the path for her ascension. The new queen was not yet crowned, but her shadow already covered the English throne. The king had been played perfectly, the queen-to-be was ready for her moment. The spring of 1533 exploded with reckless speed. With the Pope refusing to grant the annulment, Henry took the ultimate, irreversible step. He declared himself the supreme head of the Church of England. This single act severed centuries of religious tradition, all for the woman now secretly married to him. That woman was, of course, Anne Boleyn, and she was already pregnant, a fact that drove the king to feverish, public celebration. The clandestine wedding was followed by a magnificent, defiant coronation. Anne, heavily pregnant, was borne through the streets of London, the new queen, wearing the jewels Catherine had been forced to relinquish. Yet, despite the ringing church bells and the cheering crowds, a profound unease settled over the city. Many nobles and the common people still muttered their loyalty to the banished Queen Catherine. Anne's triumph was absolute. She was witty, fashionable, and powerful, wielding her influence to push the religious reforms she favored and to enrich her own family, the Boleyns. Her apartments were opulent, her dresses the envy of Europe, and the king's love, though volatile, was fierce. But the weight of the crown was heavy, and her primary duty loomed: to produce the male heir that had cost Henry so much. The pressure was immense, a silent contract she had to fulfill. In September 1533, the moment of truth arrived. The nation held its breath, awaiting the cannon salute that would announce the birth of a prince. But the salute was muted. Anne delivered a daughter, whom they named Elizabeth. Henry was, outwardly, gracious. He named the child heir presumptive, but the deep disappointment was impossible to conceal. The entire religious revolution, the abandonment of a beloved queen, the expulsion of Rome, all had resulted in another daughter. This moment marked the beginning of Anne's downfall. The king's attention, which had been a consuming fire, began to flicker. He still loved her, but his eye began to wander to other ladies of the court, testing Anne's already razor-thin patience. Anne, always politically aggressive, grew insecure. Her fiery temper, which Henry had once found captivating, now seemed shrewish and demanding. She had promised a son, and she had failed. The king started seeing the marriage, once viewed as a divine blessing, through the same suspicious, theological lens he had applied to Catherine's union. If Anne could not provide a son, perhaps this marriage, too, was a curse from God. The palace, which had celebrated her arrival with such fanfare, was quickly turning into her gilded prison. Anne's reign as queen lasted barely 1,000 days. After the disappointment of Princess Elizabeth's birth, the king's love, built on the promise of a son, began to rot. Henry was growing restless, his gaze drifting towards the calm, obedient figure of Jane Seymour, a lady-in-waiting whose quiet nature was a stark contrast to Anne's fiery passion. Anne, sensing the shifting sands, grew desperate. Her attempts to conceive again resulted in a miscarriage, and in January 1536, she suffered a devastating loss, a baby boy, stillborn. When Henry was told, his reaction was not pity, but cold anger. He muttered that he saw this as God's second clear sign that the marriage was invalid, implying that he had been seduced into marrying her by evil women. The king's trusted advisor, Thomas Cromwell, who had orchestrated Anne's rise, now saw the direction of the royal wind. With Anne failing to produce an heir and the king tiring of her high-handed demands, Cromwell understood that to protect his own position, he had to eliminate the queen. The machinery of the court, so recently bent to elevate Anne, was now silently set in motion for her destruction. The charges brought against her were staggering, almost beyond belief: adultery, incest, and high treason, alleging she had conspired to murder the king to usurp the throne. The arrests began abruptly. 5 courtiers, including Anne's own brother, George Boleyn, were seized and accused of sleeping with the queen. The air of the palace turned instantly from celebration to terror. Anne herself was arrested and taken by barge to the Tower of London, entering through the same Traitor's Gate she had passed through triumphantly as queen just 3 years earlier. Her trial was a sham, a political execution masquerading as justice. Despite her eloquent and spirited defense, she was found guilty. She was sentenced to death by burning or beheading, as the king preferred. On the morning of May 19, 1536, Anne walked onto the scaffold on Tower Green. She was not allowed the traditional English axe. Henry had graciously imported a skilled swordsman from Calais for a quicker death. Dressed in a grey damask gown, Anne maintained a serene, final dignity, giving a famous, ambiguous speech to the crowd, careful not to speak ill of the king who was about to kill her. "I pray God save the king and send him long to reign over you, for a gentler nor a more merciful prince was there never," she proclaimed, her words heavy with irony. A moment later, with a single flash of the sword, Anne Boleyn's turbulent life was ended. Within hours of her death, Henry married Jane Seymour, burying the tragic memory of the queen who had changed the course of England to bring her to the block.